With show number 13, it's hard to believe the end of another series. Once again, I'm glad we traveled, but it's so good to be home in Flat Rock, North Carolina. On this show, view a multifaceted wall hanging, plus learn the most asked questions for long arm quilting machines. Stay tuned as I try to tie up all those loose ends.
Could you imagine a more clever object? Warms the body, ignites the mind. A child sleeps under mother's creation, together forever. The art of the heart and design of the mind puts you to bed one day at a time. The art of the heart and design of the mind.
Welcome today, and to the last of our quilter's alphabet, Y and Z. Y is for yo-yo, a small gathered circular fabric that is whip-stitched together for decoration. Yes, we see them in novelty quilts where you put a solid piece of fabric underneath, but they also end up in garments. Z is for sleeping. That's what we do underneath the quilt. Didn't you love that Z quilt we saw in Florida? Now let's learn more about long-arm quilting machines from Marcia Stevens. Marcia Stevens from Brainerd, Minnesota is an authority on the long-arm quilting machines. Her magazine, it's a quarterly magazine, is called Unlimited Possibilities, and that's really what we are going to feature on today's show. Marcia, along with her husband Tom, is also the creator of the Machine Quilters Showcase. Now, it's an annual convention that gives people who own the long-arm quilting machine or even want to buy one an opportunity to learn more about the machine, take classes, and learn about all the supplies that are available. Marcia, what are the most asked questions on the machine today?
Probably the first one would be, what is the machine used for?
All right.
We have an array of samples here that I'd like to talk about. First of all, decorator fabric.
Mm-hmm.
You can receive or do your own decorator fabric just by quilting different patterns on the piece, perhaps outlining a nice flower in the design, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing would be piece tops, applique, anything that anybody would do. And they can bring it to you and you can quilt it in various patterns, designs, whatever they want, or between the two of you select.
Can we talk about our pet peeve right now?
Oh, sure.
When those tops come in, we want the edges to be the same size as the middle of the quilt and not have any biased edges, right?
No flares. Something else, too, that I'm noticing with this piece is that it's basted. We do not need to have the quilts basted. As the machines are set up, or as the fabrics are set up, they're set up in separate layers. So the back would be put on one roller, the top on a separate roller. The batting feeds between the two and is attached to the take-up roller, and then we quilt the three layers. So no basting is required.
Gives a nice taut finish, doesn't it?
Right. Keeps everything nice and flat.
And then, but now another opportunity would be if I wanted to have my quilt pre-basted. It's hard to get up and down off the floor anymore.
That's right.
This machine can base large stitches that I can then pull out readily after I do my hand quilting.
Correct. And usually when I baste for a hand quilter, I ask them what they're going to be quilting with, a frame or a hoop or whatever it might be, and then I will make my grid quilting the size that they would prefer to use.
Good idea. And now this last fabric would be like for making garments?
Exactly. A whole cloth fabric. You could use it for pillows, garments, whatever you wanted to.
Okay. Now, the second most asked question.
Well, the second most asked would be, is it computerized? And we both know from our experience that it is not. It is hand-guided. There are computerized machines, but most quilters would have the hand-guided variety. And they would be placing a pattern on the quilt top after it's set up, as we have this one set up.
Okay, well, can you perform for us?
Sure.
Okay.
The first thing that I'd like to show is an overall panograph, because that is the most common.
All right.
And in this particular one, I have started it already, and we've used some variegated threads, and I'll show you how it works with the laser. All right, we've got the laser, a fine point of light that I will use to follow the pattern as I quilt, transforming that pattern onto the quilt top. So here we go. The machine runs on a rheostat, so I can set it at any speed that I want to, depending on how fast I decide I want to move, or depending on how intricate the pattern is. Sometimes you need to move slower to create a nice design. The machine moves very easily on the rollers, on its wheels. You can see I'm just using fingertip touch.
Is this a cotton thread, Marcia? So it uses a
Yes.
variety of threads.
Right. It'll use any type of thread that you, with a little work. I mean, you do have to reset your tensions perhaps, but you certainly can use anything. We're using 100% cotton thread. We have Hobbs cotton batting in the quilt, and then of course our muslin top and bottom for this example.
What do you mean a sample? This is going to be the front of a new vest for me. I've already got that planned.
All right. Another feature of the machine, and an option that we have available to us, is channeling across a quilt. What I'll do is start a line of quilting. We have a single stitch option with the Gamma machine. I can lock my stitches by doing a one stitch, and then we have a button that engages a channel lock. I set the speed of the machine quite high because I can go quite fast across, and then just go right across with a light touch, and we get nice even stitches and a very straight line. It can't move up or down.
How wonderful. And for instance, Jana Jones, my operator, finished this last night, and she not only was able to do regular spaced lines, but then she took it off and repinned it and went in
the other direction.
Yeah,
Right,
and
and created a nice grid.
Wonderful. And this is silk fabric with brown thread, and it'll make a wonderful topping for an ottoman. I'm anxious to try the circle feature on my Gamma machine.
Okay. All right, Georgia, I've already set up the circle ease. I have the stylus locked in to about a 4-inch circle. I've locked my threads. All I need to do is turn the machine on at a very high speed because I want to make a nice even stitch length. And with the stylus in that control, I get my perfect circle.
How exciting. And then you can change sizes.
I can
whenever you
change
want to.
sizes just by shifting the little holder there.
To a different
To a different size. You can make concentric circles. You could offset them and make all kinds of designs with it.
Lots of ideas there. Now, trapunto has never been easier with these machines. The raised area is full of batting, and then to make it even more emphasized, you have done meandering behind that.
Right.
Can you show us how that's done?
I sure can.
All right. All right, Marcia, what next for trapunto?
We've rolled the quilt to reveal a new section. We've got our circle here, but I've also quilted a medallion, inset, whatever you want to call it, something that will fit into a particular area of a quilt. Now this one does not have the trapunto technique used in it. I wanted you to be able to see the difference once we have this one trapunto. Normally I do not mark quilts, but for the show I thought I would mark it so everybody could see it very easily. Now, as I said, we have Hobbs batting, 100% cotton batting. This is unwashed. So what we'll do is we'll put a thick layer of polyester batting just in this area, and we'll quilt it, and that will create the trapunto. And then if it's washed later, it will even create more trapunto.
Now that's going to be hard to slip in there because I found it will rub against the cotton batting. How am I going to?
How are you going to get it in there? Well, we have an option with this machine. We have a pivoting axis. So if you'll go down and pull the pin, we'll release the rollers.
All right. Just pull that out.
Pull that out, and then the rollers will flip up.
Oh, how wonderful. I can really get inside there.
Yes.
Ah.
And we'll bring this up.
All right, I can hold that in place.
Right. And then I have a piece of batting that I've already cut to the correct size. I didn't cut it a lot larger than the inset, so it's just going to fit that area. And then with a spray adhesive, I'm just going to put a very small amount of that on the batting, the polyester batting. And the only reason I do that is to hold it in position so that when you flip it back, it's not going to fall out of position. And then I'll go under here and line it up with the edges of that pattern so that it covers the whole area. Pat it just a little bit. That adhesive will hold it in position.
All right.
And then we can bring the
Bring
roller
this back down, and I need to release this a little bit.
Yeah,
so
just
that-
a little so that can come back up. Right, push the pin back in. And then we may need to tighten this just a little. Okay, it looks, we have a very thick polyester batting, so it looks like a little poochy, yeah, like a little pillow. And we'll put the clamps back on so that things stay in position. And I'll begin quilting.
And this is a continuous pattern that allows you to just flow.
Yes, it's one continuous line. We'll lock the stitch and take off.
It's so much fun to watch, and I think how long that would take to hand quilt, Marcia. It's just amazing.
Yes.
It really is.
This can be done, as I said, from the Panograph using the laser, so you don't have to mark the quilt.
In which case you'd be on the other side.
Now I'll complete the rest of the feather. I'll switch to a lighter color thread and do some meandering in the background so that trapunto really puffs out.
Then what color thread will you put on?
I think we'll do this the color of the background.
Oh, okay.
So that it really,
just a muslin.
right, just so that what we're going to try to do here is to mat this down. We don't want that as puffy as the leaves, so that the meandering will be very small, so that's matted down and bring the relief of the leaves.
Okay. Marcia, this close quilting that you're doing now has many different names. I relate to it as stippling, but I know you call it more meandering.
Meandering, right. It's a free-form stitch that's done from the front of the machine, and it's a technique of just filling in an area. Sometimes it's done over the whole quilt, but in this case I'm just doing the area in the background so that my trapunto will poof up real nice and puffy.
I've heard some quilters say it's a sin to cross over any of those stitching lines. Is that
Well,
mandatory, or is it?
my feeling is that because it is a free-form stitch, I don't think there is a right or wrong way to do it. Meandering can be loops, it can be stars. I'm doing kind of a landscape, what I call a landscape meandering, which is more horizontal. A person gets kind of tired of seeing the same old thing over and over and over again. So I like to do something a little different, and loops or whatever it might be. In this case, the smaller the meandering, the more matted it becomes. So that creates the trapunto. If you don't want that real tight look, then you do a much larger meandering, but you'll lose the trapunto.
It is beautiful. It truly is.
And I would do it all the way around the outside too, as I've done on one of the quilts. Now the other thing, this was done with a thicker batting in just this area. There are times when I'll have a large quilt and I need to do a lot of trapunto throughout the whole quilt. So what I'll do in that case is have the layer of cotton batting and do a full layer of polyester batting. So it's the whole quilt has the 2 layers. Then I don't have to go through the individual pieces like this, and the whole quilt is done.
And an example of that is this marvelous quilt you've bought all the way from Minnesota. Tell us about it.
That quilt was pieced by Shirley Kirsch. She was chosen as the Quilter of the Year 2000 in Minnesota. And it's a lovely, delectable mountain star. And again, I used the 2 layers of batting.
And then she, of course, recognizes you when she enters that into a contest. I think that's very important today. If someone made the quilt and someone else quilts it, that recognition needs to be given.
That's right, and that's one of the things that we try to stress at the Machine Quilter Showcase too, is you should get your recognition for your quilting, and that's what we're trying to do, is promote that.
Marcia, I'm anxious to see the collection you've brought entitled What a Difference a Stitch Makes. Explain how that began.
How that came about? Well, our local guild, the Pine Tree Patchworkers, my local guild, pieced a number of tops in the same pattern, And then I sent them out across the country to various long-arm quilters and had them quilt them in different patterns, whatever they wanted to. I didn't want anybody to know what the other person was doing. And then they were brought back to us, and we put the binding on if it needed to be done, and then we displayed them at the Machine Quilter Showcase to give that great example of what a difference a stitch makes.
And every quilt's a surprise.
That's right.
Marcia, same concept here, but with another pattern.
Right. This is the puzzler pattern. Same idea where we farm the quilts out to long-arm quilters. This particular quilter, Laura Lee Fritz, took designs from the fabric and the funky fabric, and she quilted the chickens and some of the other animals throughout the quilting design. And the one over here was done by Kathy Franks. Kathy created a walkway by making the little circles with the variegated thread. I think that's real effective, and then did a very freehand cable design in the border. Mm-hmm. And our last quilt was done by Laurel Barris from Utah, and Laurel did an actual poem throughout the whole quilt. Old MacDonald had a farm full of these crazy animals.
And she went over back and forth on the letters to really enhance them.
Yes, with a nice black thread so they showed up very nicely.
Marcia, I see such creativity that's happening with the long arm machines, and we can't thank you enough for enlightening us, and I'm anxious to try so many of these.
Oh, I hope you do. It's been my pleasure to show them to you.
Thank you, and happy travels to you.
Thank you.
Talk about loose ends. I have a couple of unfinished projects here. Now, we had a director at UNC-TV retire several years ago. They asked him, well, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to open a used tote bag shop over on the beach. Well, Jake, I've got a better idea for those tote bags. Of course, I have quite a collection, as every quilter does, of tote bags, so I have simply cut out the important part, and I'm going to make them into a quilt. Now, if I made a seam, an actual seam allowance, it would be pretty heavy because these are heavier fabrics. So I think I'll just overlap them, situate the blocks exactly where I want, balance my colors, and then the trim, and to cover those raw edges, will be my rickrack and buttons and braid. Won't this be a great quilt? Another project that we have laid out here on the floor is a real mystery. Donna Bergen was left this project in a drawer from a person in her family, and it's a lesson for us all to leave directions for unfinished projects. It's very intriguing. Pieces of lace have been stitched on paper, and there are 3 panels, but what do we do next? Where do we go? Is it a lace tablecloth or is it a quilt? Not far from the Quilt Built Studios are the village offices of Flat Rock, North Carolina. To commemorate the area, local stitchers have put together a remarkable wall hanging. Isn't it just a wonder what loving hands can create, especially mixing the mediums of needlepoint, petit point, applique, cross-stitching, patchwork, and ribbon embroidery. Jen, come on in. It is so nice for me to publicly introduce Jen Grundy, who has been in the control room for all 13 shows, watching my P's and Q's.
Good work.
Thank you very much, Jen.
It's my pleasure.
Our feature block of the series this time is called Many Mountains. It's our last one. I designed it using a flexicurve. Nice, soft, gentle curves, nothing really severe. And there are 5 mountains that come up to a dark sky and a little touch of moon in one corner. Notice that when I stitch the moon in, I then snip those seam allowances, which allows it to press open and towards the dark side very nicely. When I'm doing curves, I like to pin each end because I know I have to make that connection between those pins. Make certain that when you pin it, you get that nice straight edge, and over here that I'd have that continuous nice curve. I like to stitch with the concave seam or cut against the feed dog. So then I'm just stitching away. I use a pin or a seam ripper as a little stiletto, and you can just put that needle down in the machine as you're going along to kind of anchor any give that you might have as you come all along. And after you've gotten each one done, you will just go to your next curve. When one is done, then you'll come up, come back. A lot can happen between here and here, so I like to go back to where I was, knowing this green will be the next one. Let's take a look and see how this block will look in our series sampler. Lucky number 13 will work out right here. I could not have made this sampler without my fabric from France, and of course Ellen Noble's fabric dyeing class and leaving me her extras really helped. Isn't it amazing how her fabric just blends in with this piece? It was just meant to be. Well, we started with our block, the Eiffel Tower, and went all the way up to the patchworker. I like the Black Forest block, and down to cactus and all the way down. It's not complete. I have a few more holes and a few more squares to cut. But when I'm done, I'll have a nice remembrance of the series, complete with the lap quilting, country-to-country quilts. And now for our closing. Our 13-week series is over, but don't forget the reruns. You can request those from your local PBS program director. Check out our websites. I know you all are connected now. That's a little quilting pun, since we make so many connections. But the particulars about remote tapings are listed on Series 1100. I overheard Alan, one of our video taping crew, saying, "I didn't know there were so many quilters' special words." Yes, we do have our own dictionary, and we're very proud of that. Hope you enjoyed the Quilter's Alphabet. A sincere thank you to all of our guests who shared their talents and their quilts. The quilt world we have created revolves around major conventions such as the IQA show every year in the fall in Houston. And by the way, the next international event will be in Spain 2002, so mark your calendar. There is also that major event in Paducah, Kentucky, and also the World Quilt Textile event with the Mancuso brothers. Now, check out your local quilt shop. You can find that in the Quilter's Travel Companion. I know you keep them in business. What about those guilds? I just returned from Kerrville, Texas, the Hill Country Guild, and before that, the Ocean Waves Guild in Miami. I get so energized from just being around other quilters. So join a guild, or better still, start one of your own. My steadfast producer, Bill Hanna, knows all of you very well. For every minute you are on TV, he spends at least an hour editing. The camera people, the audio, the lighting crew are all very particular, just for your eyes and ears. Note that we have closed caption this time, and it's provided by Prim Dritz. We thank our other underwriters. Many of their products will end up in your quilt stash. Maybe we need another letter, S for stash. These underwriters believe in you and your work. So long for now. And one more thing, what am I going to do with all these dog ears?
Closed captioning made possible by OmniGrid, manufacturer of the original patented black and yellow rulers and green cutting mats, and Collins, well known for notions and tools for quilt makers. For more information about patterns and designs shown on this series, visit Georgia at www.georgiabonesteel.com. Lap quilting with Georgia Bonesteel is made possible in part by grants from Bernina, makers of sewing machines manufactured with the care of traditional Swiss workmanship. Nothing sews like a Bernina. Nothing. By Gamel Quilting Machine Company, offering 4 sizes of long-arm hand-guided machines to quilters worldwide. By Coates & Clark, America's #1 name in sewing, hand knitting, and craft products. By Martingale and Company, home of That Patchwork Place, publisher of America's best-loved craft and hobby books. By Hobbs Bonded Fibers, maker of heirloom premium cotton and wool batting, with a package labeling system to help quilters select the correct batting for specific projects. And by Horn of America, cabinets of the future today.